What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Resurrect. Today we are talking about ways that you can minimize risk at the salvage auction and avoid losing money. And that's 5 ways that you can do that. Now, we're going to get right on into this, but the first thing that you can do is to never overpay. And what does it mean to overpay? What is a salvage car worth? What is a rebuilt car worth? There is nobody that can establish those numbers because there is such a varying degree of damage at the salvage auto auctions. But here's some of my general guidelines for myself. And when I apply these guidelines, I typically apply it to vehicles under $50,000 because that's where I'm typically at. I don't typically buy vehicles over $50,000, and there's probably a different set of rules when you get into very expensive cars. But for me, I know for a fact that I can land these cars between 20 and 35% of the retail value. And anytime that I surpass that amount and I pay a little bit too much, I will soon realize that there is always a better deal right around the other corner. Whether it be a couple weeks from that auction or a couple months, there is always a better deal. And I watch each and every auction locally, and I watch auctions across the country. And I know this to be the case because sometimes I'll even see buy it nows for way less than what I paid winning that car at auction. So don't get stuck on one deal. Recognize that there's always a better deal just around the corner. So in the past, when I've been closer to 25% of the retail value, I typically could always find a way out of the deal if I needed to. But as I got closer to 35, or if I surpassed 35% of the retail value, there was a high chance that I would probably lose money on the deal. So you have to always consider that initial investment on that car, how much you're willing to pay. That has a big bearing on whether or not you're going to make money on the car. Now, if you're planning on just keeping cars for yourself, well, then a lot of these rules won't apply, and what it's worth to you is just whatever it's worth to you. But it's still a good idea if you're buying a car for yourself as a project to kind of take into heart what people that are rebuilding for and flipping are paying for, because you certainly can get that same deal for yourself. Now, you have to also always assume the worst case scenario with these vehicles. You can never just assume, oh, it's running and driving, it's being sold by an insurance company, it's going to be a great deal. Believe it or not, many times I've thought that, and then you get the car on a lift and you find out there's some expensive problems with this vehicle, other problems that you did not anticipate. So always assume the worst case scenario. Always recognize that there's another deal around the corner, and if you do, you will never overpay. Now, the second point here on helping you guys minimize risk and losses at the salvage auction, and this is mostly applies to newer buyers, but to all buyers really, is to always make sure that you inspect that car personally or have a service do it. But once you've done it for some time, you may choose to not do it. I choose for the most part to not inspect the vehicles, and I'll tell you why. Is I can spend all day at the auction sizing up 10 cars, closely examining them, setting budgets for myself, and then I can watch the auction, and all 10 of them can go to other buyers who are willing to pay a lot more than I was. And coupled with that is the fact that locally, if I want to go look at a car here locally, most of the salvage auctions here will not let me just walk around unsupervised. So you're going to have to wait for someone to escort you to these cars. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to take up your time, and you might lose a lot of time, and time is money. So for me, I've chosen to not inspect vehicles and open up my map to the entire country. That's how I land the best deals, and that works for me. But don't do that until you have some experience and you feel comfortable with taking those risks. The third point I want to share with you on minimizing your risks at the salvage auction and avoiding loss is to always do your research. And there's a lot of free ways to do research, and there's a lot of inexpensive ways to do research. And the money that you spend doing research is well worth it, because these cars that you could be buying are in the hundreds or thousands of dollars, whereas it might only take $5 or $10 to do the research. So the first thing you can do is absolutely free. You can just take the VIN number and throw it in a Google search and see what comes up. Look through the photos that come up. You might see some old listings of the vehicle being sold at another salvage auction or a different auction, or you might be being sold at a dealer or a Craigslist listing. There's a lot of information that can be had by just doing a quick Google search. Now, another thing you can do is when you're looking at the listing on insurance auto auctions or Copart, you can verify the retail price. You can never assume that the information on that listing is correct. I've seen things as like 10-year-old Toyota Camrys that are worth $100,000. I mean, you can put any number you want in there. And in fact, when you sell a car at Copart and you tell the rep how much you want to put in there, they're going to put that in there. You can just put whatever number you want. They don't care. So don't trust the retail amount that's listed in the auction listing. Also, it's a good idea to understand the document types out there. You obviously, if you're flipping and you want to sell a car that's functioning, you're going to want a clean title or you're going to want a salvage rebuildable title. Everything else is a question mark or a no-go if you want to sell it as a driving and functioning car. So that means CODs, certificate of destructions, no, that's a no deal. Bill of sale, that's also typically not a good deal. And a non-repairable titles as well. Now, there are some ways around some of these documents, but they're going to involve time and money, which is things you don't have when you're flipping cars, extra time and extra money. That's going to cause you to lose money, potentially. Now, regarding pending titles, sometimes next to the title, you'll see a P in brackets, and that means that the title is pending, and that merely, what that means is that Copart, this is just a Copart thing, but it means that they don't have that title at that point. And that is a typical behavior of a dealer or a third-party seller. Usually insurance companies will submit the titles with the cars. However, that is generally how things are. It's not always the case. There are exceptions, but that is what that means, and it's good to keep that in mind. Another thing you can do as far as research goes is use vehiclehistory.gov. That is the organization known as the a National Motor Vehicle Title Information System. Dealers and salvage yards know this very well because you need to use this. Typically, the Department of Motor Vehicles wants you to submit information to this database, and the insurance companies also have to do this as well. But you, as a consumer, can go onto the websites that they recommend, and you can get information as far as vehicle history reports that are very inexpensive, a lot less than a Carfax or an auto check. So it's worth it to check these sometimes. You can get a lot of useful information on the history of that particular vehicle, maybe why it was totaled. Another thing you can do is subscribe to a autoauction.io, which a lot of other YouTubers have recommended to use. I don't get paid by this service. I don't get paid by anything on YouTube. Everything at this point has just been all pro bono. But autoauction.io is a great way to get information on what cars have actually sold for, and it kind of can point you in the right direction as far as who's selling the car, whether it's a third party or an insurance company. I don't believe that this website is 100% accurate. I think it's probably a lot of algorithms trying to figure things out, but I don't think it's 100% accurate, but it can point you in the right direction and give you a pretty good idea as far as what's going on with this vehicle. Another thing you can do is if you want to, for research and trying to know what cars have sold for, is very simple and it's free. But any auction that you're interested in, you can do a screen recording on your computer. I use QuickTime. You can use other apps and programs as well. But just doing the screen recording, if you're not available to watch the auction, then you can get what every single car at the auction sold for, and you can see for yourself, was this on an if or they call it a on approval type bid. You can find out if it actually sold. So you can get all kinds of information, and that's an easy way to do it. And the last way to do your research that I'll recommend is eBay. eBay is a great platform that you can find out what things actually sold for, and you can isolate vehicles by what they sold for and what type of title status they had. And then you can isolate and see, okay, here's a vehicle just like the one I'm interested in, and this is what they sold it for on eBay. That kind of indicates to me what the general interest of this vehicle is. Now, it's always not a sure thing because on eBay, you don't always know if the buyer backed out of the deal or the seller backed out of the deal, but it can give you some insight onto what that car might be worth, whether it be in its damaged state or its rebuild state, because there's a lot of guys on eBay who just pull cars out of Copart Insurance Auto Auctions and just throw them up on eBay and sell them damaged to people that have no idea what Copart Insurance Auto Auctions are. And believe it or not, majority of the country here in the United States has no idea what Copart and Insurance Auto Auctions are. So the fourth tip I have for you on minimizing risk and avoiding loss at the salvage auction is third-party sellers. This is advice about third-party sellers. Now, a lot of YouTubers will tell you, don't buy stuff from third-party sellers. And I kind of disagree with that to an extent. Cars from third-party sellers are not insurance companies. They are typically people that have purchased from the insurance company and now they're reselling it. So it could be a dealer. It could be another rebuilder that just is bailing on a situation. It could be somebody that just needed parts for a particular project and then they're disposing of the rest of the car. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. You have to remember that Copart and insurance auto auctions, some of their main buying customers are salvage yards and exporters, people that are looking to make money on parts. Not necessarily, the rebuilder is not like the main buyer for these auctions. However, that's kind of changing over the years, and I think rebuilding has picked up a lot of pace over the years as far as doing it on your own. But there's a lot of reasons why somebody would throw a car back at Copart Insurance Auto Auctions, and you just have to consider that, and then just be cautious. So you just be a little bit more cautious with third-party sellers, and but you can try to get information based on the photos. The possibilities for problems on third-party sellers is there are some dishonest ones out there that will pull out hidden things of the car, airbags and other items that you might need for rebuilding. Critical parts. They might pull the transmission out of the car and they leave the engine, but you can see the engine, but you can't see the transmission. There's cases like that. Always just assume a worst case scenario though. I mean, even from insurance cars, the body shops will pull off parts and you sometimes won't always know what they pulled off until you get it. So there is caution with everything. I mean, you need caution with everything, including the insurance cars, because you could get an insurance car and it was the guy who was driving it was not doing any maintenance to the car whatsoever. And you could get that car, it's wrecked, and then you drain that oil and it comes out and it looks like jelly. So never assume that you're safe at the salvage auction. Every deal at the salvage auction could be a bad deal, and you need to assume that and base all your decisions around that, because if you don't, you can end up with a very bad deal. And the fifth and the last tip I'm going to give you for minimizing risks and avoiding losses at the salvage auction is what to actually do when you get in over your head, or you get a car that for whatever reason you cannot solve this problem, and then you are worried that you are going to lose money because you can't fix it right. So the first thing you can try doing is take a week or two and just see what kind of reception you get on selling the car as is. And you can put it up on Craigslist, OfferUp, LetGo, Nextdoor. There's so many free resources that you can do. And there's also paid resources as well. But believe it or not, I have bailed out of many deals by doing that. And I've actually made money from time to time by just selling the car broken to somebody who wants a project car. And they do not know that there are auctions that they could buy these cars at. So that's a great option. Another thing you could do is send it back to auction. Now, I don't believe insurance auto auctions will deal with the average consumer trying to get rid of their car that they bought from them. I'm not sure about that, but I know for a fact Copart does, and I've done it in the past many times. And so you can throw that car back at the Copart auto auction and see if you can get your money back. And obviously, if you paid closer to that 25% of the retail value, you are much more likely to get your money back. But if you're up in the 35% or more, nobody's going to give you your money back, especially nowadays when people know how much you paid for the car, at least the savvy ones. It's a little bit tricky to get your money back, but it is possible. There's a lot of ignorant buyers out there who just don't know, are not savvy with auto auctions, and they have money. So there's a possibility that you could get your money back by throwing it back at the auction. And the last thing that you could do if you get in over your head, or you just get into a bad deal, is to just part the vehicle. Now this works on certain cars very, very well. European cars, any type of car that's difficult to find parts on, this can work awesome. You can make quite a bit of money just parting the cars. But if it's a domestic car, sometimes a car that's more mass produced and parts are more readily available at the salvage yards, you may not be able to do that effectively. So a lot of this depends on what kind of car you have. So there you have it, guys. That is my 5 tips for avoiding losing money at the salvage auction and minimizing the risks involved. And we're going to have a lot more videos trying to help beginners navigate salvage auctions and just open up the discussion more, so that you guys can be more savvy. And as well as myself, I enjoy learning from other rebuilders and other dealers and other people. I always enjoy tips, and if you have any, please send them in through your comments below, and like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And also, you can find me on Instagram under Resurrect, the same exact name as this channel. Follow me on Instagram, and we'll have additional supplementary stuff posted on there. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.